The American Revolution was one of the most important events in our history. It defined not only America, but the entire world. All of the planet has been affected by America. Our group is going to talk about some of the most influential events during the war, as well as the question of why do people rebel. Now, the Gaspee Incident. Sir William Duddington, captain of Her Majesty's ship Gaspee, was notorious throughout the waters for being an overzealous officer, often boarding ships, getting rid of cargo, and taking over them without good reasoning. Most people believe that these attacks were pointed towards the Sons of Liberty, maybe to try and provoke them for one reason or another. Duddington, fortunately, was put into his place when a local ship got the Gaspee's attention and lured them towards what is now known as Gaspee Point, where the ship ran aground. John Brown and a team of 55 men raided the Gaspee, attacking Duddington and his crew, and left them to watch as their ship was looted and burned. Later, Duddington and his crew were actually brought to court and tried for carrying illegal goods. Then Brown and his group were tried by the British, who were outraged, but fortunately for them, the lawsuit never amounted to anything. The Gaspee Incident was a very big part of the American Revolution, almost solely because of the amount of tension that it created between two countries. They knew something was brewing at this point, and that one or the other was going to have to go eventually.
Companies sell their tea in the colonies, hoping the colonists will buy their tea, even though it will be taxed, which when the colonists found out, they thought that was intolerable. It was one act of money that the colonists did towards the British because of taxation. So since the British were big on tea, they decided to approach 3 ships of British tea, 342 containers, and throw it all on Boston Harbor. Obviously, the King George III, and Parliament got mad, so he decided to pass a series of acts to punish the colonies for what they did that day and for previous resistances, in which he called the Intolerable Acts. The British then closed off Boston Harbor, which was one of the busiest and wealthiest ports in the colonies. The people who did it were Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty, who were disguised as Mohawk Indians so that no one would identify them. This is important because the laws King George III passed got the colonists closer to war with Parliament because of the taxes and many other things that Parliament was doing that the colonists were not okay with.
On September 5th, 1774, delegates from each colony except for Georgia, who was facing an Indian uprising and needed British supplies. The delegates met in Philadelphia as their mission was to organize a resistance against the Parliament's course of acts. The course of acts were a series of acts the British enforced upon the colonists. Some of the delegates included John Adams of Massachusetts and George Washington of Virginia. After much debate, the Congress finally passed the Declaration of Rights, confirming its loyalty to the British but saying no to the Parliament's right to tax. The Congress also passed the Articles of Association, which told the colonies to stop importing goods from Britain if the British did not repeal the course of acts. After announcing all these acts, the Congress disbanded on October 26, 1774.
The Untitled Chapter was the American Patriots' terms for the series of constitutional laws passed by the British Parliament in 1774. After the British Tea Party, they were meant to punish the Massachusetts colonies for their defiance in throwing a large tea shipment into the Boston Harbor. In Great Britain, these laws were referred as the Corrective Acts. The acts took away Massachusetts' self-government and historic rights, triggering outrage and resistance in the 13 colonies. They were key developments in the outbreak of the American Revolution. In 1775, 4 of the acts were issued in a direct response to the Boston Tea Party. In December 1773, the British Parliament hoped these punctual measures would, by making an example of Massachusetts, reverse the trend of the colonial resistance, the parliamentary authority that had begun with the 1765 Stamp Act. A fifth act, the Quebec Act, enlarged the boundaries of what was then province of Quebec and insulated reforms generally favorable to the French calculated inhabitants of the region. Although unrelated to the other 4 acts, it was passed in the same legislative session and seen by the colonies as one of the Untitled Acts. The patriots viewed the acts as an arbitrary violation of the rights of Massachusetts, and in September of 1774, they organized the first parliamentary congress to coordinate a protest. As tension escalated, the American Revolution War broke out in April 1775, leading in July 1776 to Declaration of Independence of America.
The Battle of Lexington and Concord, fought on April 19, 1775, was the first battle of the Revolutionary War. There had been previous tensions between the colonists and the British. The battle was sparked when hundreds of British troops were on their way from Boston to Concord to collect military weapons when Paul Revere, along with two other Minutemen, one being Dr. Joseph Warren, warned local townspeople about this, hence the famous Midnight Ride with Paul Revere. During this, men were confronted by troops where the fighting started. The fighting resulted in the British retreat in the First Battle of Lexington and Concord. Leading up to this battle were many small incidents with two parties, and a battle was needed to start things off. The colonists were led by the Sons of Liberty and their troops, the Minutemen. In Lexington, John Pitcairn, one of the British generals at the time, first entered Lexington at sunrise. The militiamen, led by John Harper, were coming from Bucktown Tavern. These men were amongst the Lexington group by the name of the Training Band, a way to organize local militias dating back to Puritan time. Rather than turn left towards Concord, Lieutenant Jesse Adair, the head of the advance guard of the light infantry companies from the 4th, 5th, and 10th regiments on foot, he decided to protect the flank of his troops by turning right and then leading the companies down the common itself in a confused effort to surround the militia. These men ran towards the Lexington militia, loudly crying, "Huzzah!" to rouse themselves and confuse the militia. As they formed a battle line on the common, Pitcairn arrived at the rear of the advance force and led his 3 companies to the left and halted them. The remaining companies lay behind the village meeting on the house road back towards Boston. On Concord, the militiamen of Concord and Lincoln, in response to the alarm in Concord, they received reports of a firing at Lexington, but did not know if it was a live shot or merely powder. And they were not sure whether to wait until they could be reinforced by troops from the superior terrain. Militia marched to Lexington to fight the British. As the regulars numbered about 700 and the militia at this time only numbered about 250, the militia retreated and went back to Concord. Colonial James Baird surrendered the town of Concord and took his men to go watch the British movements. This step proved itself as the number of militias continued to grow as the Minutemen were arriving. The Battle of Lexington and Concord was needing for a war to begin, something involving the Minutemen getting caught and forced to fight. This proves the war being inevitable because eventually the colonial men would get caught. The only reason this war started with this situation is because neither knew of the other's plans, and it was bound to happen, which makes the Battle of Lexington and Concord inevitable for the Revolutionary War to happen.
One of the questions that was asked is, why do people rebel? This is a challenging question, and considering that it doesn't have one side to it, so I had to cover every side to please all of the parties involved. I think that one of the parts of the answer to this question is government. Not just any old government, but bad government. Remember Oliver Cromwell. Despite him being a terrible ruler, his story does have relevance to the topic. The king of his time was oppressive, right? So the people rebelled and cut off his head. It was rebellion because the government was doing a bad job. Let's go back to the time period that we started off with. The British are governing America. There was a revolution wherein the Americans attempted to separate the British crown. Why? Politics and government again. The British government is unfairly taxing the American people and keeping them in a small box so that it is easier for the British to exploit them. Unfortunately, that is not totally the case for the reason that people rebel. It typically also has to do with money and the rebels owning incentives. The Americans had a huge smuggling business that was keeping them afloat, and with the British laws, the Americans were not making the amount of cash that they wanted to earn. So the only way that they could become rich and powerful people that they aspired to be was to try and escape all the taxes that were being put onto them by Britain. Put simply, I think that even though there are a lot of reasons why people rebel, it can generally be put under 2 categories, government and money. They are, at the core, why people rebel.